Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic interview show. It's episode 482. I've got my great co-host with me this week. So we've got the good-looking, intelligent one with us. And we've got a great guest as well. We've got Davis Nguyen with us as well. So, Davis, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Absolutely. My name is Davis, and I run a company called My Consulting Offer. What we do is we help people become management consultants. And similar to many of the other guests that come on, we have a membership site all powered through WordPress as well as Kinsta. So free plug for your sponsors there. And this company started roughly about 3 years ago as basically in my living room while I was working at another company. And we quickly scaled it to where it is today with now we have full and part-time, about 40 people worldwide working on the organization.
And I just thought Davis would be a great guest because he's built this initially by himself. It's a niche membership proposition. It's more than a membership site, but at its core, it's that. Something that if you were building a membership site, you probably wouldn't think of doing. So I thought it was an intriguing proposition. Over to also my co-host, Adrian. Would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the new listeners and viewers, Adrian?
Hi, everybody. My name is Adrian. I am the CEO and founder of Groundhog. We build and produce marketing automation and sales plugins for businesses that use WordPress, and currently stuck at home in my urban apartment, working remotely these days, which is why the background is no longer a whiteboard.
That's right. So before we go into the main part of the interview, I want to talk about our major sponsor, which is Kinsta. If you got a membership site, WooCommerce, anything that is performance orientated, you need better hosting than the average hosting provider. And that's what you get with Kinsta. They use Google Cloud as their platform, but also they have provided a fantastic interface. As I said in previous episodes, when I have to go to clients hosting backends and it's not Kinsta, I think to myself, oh, I couldn't use this. I've just got used to the quality of Kinsta, and their interface is one of the best on the market. Also, they offer 24/7 support from people that really do understand WordPress and can provide really top-tier advice on the spot. You don't have to wait and be moved up the food chain. You get the top advice from the moment you contact them. And it's just fantastic. And we've been with them for about 3 or 4 years now. They keep on sponsoring the show. So go over there, buy one of the packages for yourself or for one of your clients, but you must also tell them that you heard about them on the WP-Tonic show. So let's get on to the main part of the interview. I thought we agreed, it's a little bit off topic, but I thought we might as well have a quick see what's going on. So you're stuck in Taiwan, in the capital. So how things have been going on with dealing with the virus in Taiwan?
So I guess I am one of those people that I guess I'm pretty lucky that I am stuck in Taipei because we actually had a couple of events here in Asia before everything took over and they canceled all the public events. So I was out here speaking at a university in Singapore, and actually I was on my way back to San Francisco and flying through Taipei to get there. And of course, then you have the lockdowns and the borders closings. So I am technically in Taiwan for an indefinite number of weeks, months, but overall we're very similar, where it's like no public events. As in, one of the things I will find funny is that as more cities in the US are getting closed down, what you define as essential is very different. So anyone who's looking at this from Facebook Live, you can notice I probably got a haircut. So haircut is actually one of those essential things you could do in Taiwan. But like, for example, in Denver, I learned today the dispensaries are apparently essential. And in my hometown for a little bit, GameStop was actually essential. So I was like, whatever it is. But the situation here, I would say, is pretty good from the outside, well, there's no one roaming around freely, but I've learned to make do, and maybe my joke is that maybe in a couple of months I'll be fluent in Mandarin.
So have there been a lot of cases of the virus in Taiwan so far?
Yeah, so there's been an increase, but the interesting thing is that the increases they are thinking are coming from people who are coming in who before they close the borders, one of the reasons. So right now there's actually a fine for anyone who is local, about 30,000 USD, which is like about 3 years worth of salary for the average Taiwanese if they did come from abroad and they decided not to obey the quarantine. So huge enforcement. And for foreigners like myself, that would be like 300,000 USD.
Right, so they're serious, and that is helping stop it from spreading totally out of control.
Absolutely. So I think Taipei is doing and Taiwan is doing such a world-class example of what's happening. As in, for example, as soon as I came in, they made sure I take my temperatures, my thermostat here for like twice a day. And then I've been audited by the government at least once. So I probably will get audited one more time before my 2 weeks are over. But they came in, made sure my files are there, and I took records of my temperature and that I'm good. So they're taking this quite seriously.
Oh, great. So on to your company. So what led you to decide to start this up, actually? What was the core moment, you thought, I will attempt to build this business?
Before we go into that, I think a little bit of exposition might be in order. So first of all, what is your company? What's your value proposition? And just explain that, and then we'll get into to the why.
Yeah, so we help people, college students themselves, recent grads, become management consultants. So for anyone who is watching the show, never heard of management consulting, think of it as a SWAT team or a business doctor for businesses. So if they have a hairy problem, like for example, if they're thinking about if they should cut costs, if they're thinking about they should expand to another country, like let's say a huge company like AT&T, they'll hire a management consulting firm to come in there and help them figure out the optimal solution. So what makes this job so lucrative is if you think at some of the prime ministers who run the country right now, some of the CEOs of these companies like Sheryl Sandberg, CEO of Facebook, all these people came from management consulting because it is truly a SWAT team training ground for business. And so every year you get about 1% of people who actually apply for these positions that actually get it. So you have a 1% chance of getting this lucrative job that makes 6 figures out of college. But our value prop is that we actually place about 85% of the people. So roughly about 17 out of every 20 people who work with us get the 6-figure job, right? And then of course you earn more as you continue on. So that's our value prop.
All right, on. And so how did you find yourself in this industry?
Good question. So I always thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so a little bit of background is that my family, they came from a very unorthodox background, which is my family, they're political refugees from Vietnam. So they escaped the war after Vietnam. They actually took some boats and then moved from country to country before making it to the US. So we were part of the 20% of people who, out of 2 million who moved by boat, actually made it. So we actually became political refugees. My family, they basically do skilled labor or manual labor with their hands and so forth. So growing up, I never knew what management consulting was, as in college wasn't even an expectation for my community. But eventually I was lucky and had some amazing teachers who believed in me, and ended up getting a full scholarship to Yale and Harvard, where I ended up attending. And during my summers, I would actually intern at companies that were building out these amazing, amazing visions for what the world could look like. And so I would intern with these amazing people. And at the end of my summers, the CEOs who were twice or 3 times my age would say, "Hey, Davis, you know what? There's something called management consulting. You should look into it, and just do that for a couple of years before you become an entrepreneur." So I went back to my senior year of university, which is, by the way, very late, because you usually plan for this stuff in advance. It's not like one day you decide to wake up and become a doctor. It's like you have to do all these steps. And same thing with consulting. So I had about 3 weeks to prep for my own recruiting process for these jobs, when traditionally people spend years trying to prepare for these. And so I had to figure out within 3 weeks, how do I actually beat out 99% of other people who are applying for the same positions? And that's how I ended up finding myself into this position, is that 3 mentors said, "Hey, Davis, you should be a management consultant." And I was like, well, I want to be like you guys when I grow up. So management consulting it is.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Okay, then that's pretty unorthodox. So I'm assuming that your 3 weeks of prep paid off.
3 weeks of prep paid off, as in I don't advise anyone to wait till 3 weeks, but we did figure out a system to do it. I think that's one of the things I would say is probably a strength of mine, is figuring out how to get from point A to point B in the shortest time possible. Like, you talk about my school community I grew up in was called the worst school system in the US. And to go to like a Harvard or Yale, I basically used the same technique, which is thinking about, all right, what are they looking for? How do I demonstrate those skills? How do I acquire those skills as quickly as possible? So I did the same thing when it came to the process for getting interviews at these consulting firms, which is what do they actually look for in their resume cover letter? I have no clue what a resume and cover letter is, but I'll figure this out. And for the interview process, all right, so they have this fancy technical interview process. How do I master that within 3 weeks? And so that was the same process I did when I was going to college in eventually applying it, and it worked out.
Wow.
Wow. So I presume you got a managerial job that you were looking for. So what led to you wanting to start your company in this area?
Absolutely. So it came as a necessity, since we're talking about healthcare and how the system's supporting the coronavirus situation going here, was that, so US healthcare system, very broken, as in there's so many holes in it. And so one of the holes is that, so my family, they basically buy the lowest insurance possible if they're not already covered by Medicaid. And so after I worked at one of the consulting firms, Bain & Company, I actually went to work in an education tech company called JumpCut. So JumpCut, also fantastic education tech company. But part of it was, at the time, we weren't profitable yet. So I came in and my job was, all right, Davis, make us profitable, work with the team. And so I still needed to make an income. So I just gave up this cushy management consulting 6-figure job to go and work at this startup that's not making money. And we have about 6 months of runway at this point. So I needed to find out. And I was like, okay, I live pretty frugally. And then one of my family members happened to be hospitalized, and there was a $21,000 medical bill that needed to be paid off. And I just do not have $21,000, leaving the 6-figure job, living in California, paying California taxes, working at this startup that's not making money, in education of all things. And so to figure it out, I was like, well, I probably need a side hustle or something. So decided on the weekend, all right, let's test a couple of ideas. And the idea that just resonated the most to me was, a lot of people want to be management consultants. I should probably see if I can help people get interviews and pass the interviews. And that was the start of it, was in my living room, Saturdays and Sundays. I would just spend time helping people with their resumes, their technical interviews. And then eventually that's how we grew. And that's how I got started, was like, Davis, there's a $21,000 medical bill that needs to be paid off. You need to figure out how to pay that off.
So how did it start? So I'm assuming that your first instinct when you started helping people wasn't to like spin up a WordPress site, membership site, or maybe it was, but what were your first like baby steps into the into starting to help people?
I would joke that the membership rights, the WordPress, and everything else didn't happen until 11 months into it. In the beginning, I was like, fuck, I can't even afford this right now. As in, I can't even afford Bluehost right now. So I need to probably figure out how to make money right away. So how it actually spun up was, I decided, I have this whole idea that in order to validate a business idea really quickly, you need to do one thing, which is, it's not science, you need clients. So you just need people to pay for your stuff. And so I decided to go online, and I realized there are certain forums, in particular Reddit is something that I spend a lot of time on. And so there's a sub community on Reddit that talks about how to get into management consulting. So I just provided a ton of value, and people would just ask questions about the interview process, what their chances are. And people would give like these 1-2 sentence answers, and some of them weren't even in the industry. So I decided to answer with these paragraphs, these essays, and then left a basic call to action, said, hey, if you want more information, feel free to DM me. And so people who post the original question, as well as any lurkers, would just message me out, and then I would just get them on the phone, provide more value. And at the end of it, it's like, hey, look, I'm gonna set up this service here where I'm gonna help people get interviews and get people offers. Would you be interested? And then I just picked a price out of thin air that was comfortable at the time that would pay off the $21,000. And I just said, all right, let's just sell enough seats here. And then the first 12 calls I had, every single person said, Davis, I'm into your program, which told me one thing, which is like, my price is way too low then. Way too low.
Yes. If everybody can afford it, that means it's too low.
Exactly. But I did everything I could to help them, and all 12 of them ended up getting offers in consulting. And then they originally would start the trend of everything else with like filming our testimonial videos and making sure that we had these case studies to use for later. But they were the impetus. As in, my joke was that if you think about how much they paid and how many hours I put in, I would have made more money as an Uber driver post paying for gas, post
How
taxes.
much did they pay?
In the beginning, it was like $1,000 to $2,000 per person, which again, I just needed validation and proof at the time.
Right.
And so that's what the price was back then. And it was
And
enough to
what
pay
was
the
your
medical.
investment in that?
The investment I will tell you was $14.99. All I needed was a Zoom account to host these meetings, and that was it. And then PowerPoint was Google Slides was free, YouTube was free. Yeah, I just needed $14.99 for a pro account for Zoom.
And you did all of this over the phone and by email and by Reddit, no site, no nothing, just
No, nothing. Like you're gonna joke
Wow.
about this, right? When it gets to like the membership, obviously like with a membership site, you have like a community, you have your videos, you have your posts and things like that. But literally in the beginning, phase one was all these videos. We would do a group chat, and I would literally upload it as a unlisted video on YouTube, and those were our sessions. So when people were enrolling, like the second batch, they were literally paying for videos that were unlisted on YouTube. And then I got a little better, which is all right, you know what? Let's do a Google Drive. Yes, that's what we need. Let's move all the videos to Google Drives. It's a little nicer now. And then before we start having a website before anything else. That was basically how we started. Was to me, it was like I don't need a website because I don't even know if this business is going to survive. And then I even joked, we didn't even have a bookkeeper or accountant until I had to pay my taxes. Because my joke was that either this business is going to fail and I have no taxes to pay, or I'm going to have some money and I'll just pay some CPA to bail me out of our lack of keeping track of it, which is terrible to say as a management consultant. But in the first 11 months, I was just basically trying to pay off this bill. So nothing else mattered to me.
wow.
No, I think you kind of validate something I've been hammering away. I was interviewed on a podcast yesterday, and they asked me what was the main thing that I would advise people, and I say, don't build a course that's war and peace. Don't spend a ton of money. You need to validate, is there a real need for the thing you're trying to teach? And you're you coming on the show and saying what you've just said is the perfect validation. So I thank you for that. We're going to go for our break, folks. We're back. I think you can already see that this is going to be a fascinating discussion. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. We're talking about Davis Nguyen's adventure in building a successful membership site around teaching people how to be management consultants, or more precisely, getting their foot in the door of becoming a management consultant. So those early days, when was the next move? When was the next step where you thought, thought, yes, this is going to be a real business? And what were the things you had to do to move it forward again?
Good question. So in the beginning, I thought it was just going to be a side hustle that brings me in enough to pay for my medical bills, and maybe I'll continue to do it. But it slowly, when I knew I had hit this market product fit, Adrian, you'll resonate with this given everything I know about your company here, is that sooner enough, you just need to be able to, you have more customer support and client support emails than you can handle. It's kind of like, oh, wow, people actually want to work with you, but you don't have enough time in the day to do it. And so I was spending like 20 hours a weekend with clients, just working with them and trying to make them to get these job offers. Of course, I'm still working as my regular job during this time, which again, as a startup, we had 6 months of runway. So I'm pulling at this time, maybe on a good week, 50 hours, maybe 60 hours on a week, and during the weekday, and then on the weekends doing this other 20 hours. And I was just like, oh, this is a lot. I need help. And I realized our business was very simple. Like most businesses, this really only comes down to three things, which is where do you get your prospective leads, which is where's your marketing, where's your sales, you have to convince them to get on, and then where's your fulfillment or your product. And I realized the bottleneck was we were getting a lot, or really good problem is that we were getting a lot of people who were interested, referrals and so forth. We were getting a lot of people who wanted to learn more about the program. So the sales process for me is, I guess you could say I was our first salesperson. And then there was fulfillment with this coaching of helping people get these interviews and pass them. And so that was the first bottleneck, because I realized I needed to give one of these up. And so it started with the product, which is how can I find and hire more coaches who care about my clients as much as I do? So in the beginning, it was just putting together a process of, like, one thing I would do is I would go online on LinkedIn and find people who were, let's say, former teachers who also became management consultants. Because kind of like if you were a teacher in a classroom, I assume you're pretty good at teaching. So you could probably get on and do it. And so that's what I did in the early days, was just LinkedIn, finding these senior teachers. Obviously, it doesn't scale very well, but it was able to hire, subcontract out a lot of the work, and I knew the quality was high. Today, we have like a 20-hour vetting process for becoming a coach on our team. But back then, it was just like, I just needed help right then and now. I remember my first coach I ever hired was my best friend had just flown down one of my best friends has flown down to California to get a tattoo done. And I was literally at a tattoo parlor, and I have like 80 emails or something. I'm like, oh, okay, I need help here. And so I'm literally scrolling through LinkedIn, contact someone, and we're just basically chatting. And I'm just like, all right, cool, you're hired. And then the next day she started part-time with me. And so that's like the early days before we had all these 20 hours of systems of interviews and so forth. But she was stellar. And then our first coaches were all stellar, and they basically freed up my time to.
Can I just stop there? You hired this first person and you said she was stellar, and you make it, a lot of people, they might, I'm trying to grasp to ask the right question here, but I think
you hired someone in 20 minutes in a tattoo parlor and they were great. How did you do that?
Reflecting, I think that there must have been something more than just luck. Have you spent any time thinking about what that thing was?
Absolutely. I think what I thought about was when I think about hiring for us right there, as in I am such a slow hire, which is when I tell this 20-minute story, people just assume, oh, I just hire like left and right. But when people have to go through, like our operations manager, I went through like 210 candidates, even had some people try for trial before we got to her. But the thing that really stood out in the original was that their LinkedIn, you could find a lot on their LinkedIn. They were filled out. There were people who were leaving reviews. You could see that they really took time to really polish. And then even though it was a 20-minute call, I was like literally just called them, and they had the number. I was like, hey, I'm just gonna call this person. And then while I'm waiting for my friend who has like this 2-hour tattoo that he's doing, I literally went through that time and just chatted, and she was super responsive. And I asked her, how would you respond to this? Did you ever have a student who was difficult with this? How did you handle that? And of course, I was still going to have her trial through a client just to see how she would do. And so it's just the 20-minute was like, all right, I know she has good character, good values, and it looks like from her profile, she hits all these boxes. Plus, she was already in management or left management consulting, which means that she beat out like 99% of other people. So she has that filtration already. And then she was just stellar with the first client. So I continued to send her more until eventually she moved on to another position. But it was that's how I think about it, is when it comes to hiring, I think about what are their values. Like values are so important to me, is that if our values are not aligned, then I don't care how skilled you are, because there's just more trouble coming to be. And then the skills we test on the actual live project. In her case, the actual live project was a client. Nowadays, when people interview for the same coaching role, you have to go through and get basically mock coaching for a bunch of the people in our organization. So now that we have that system built out, but in the beginning, it's kind of like the startup days. You're just there's fires everywhere, and you're just trying to put them out. So my joke was that like the CEO is basically chief extinguisher officer.
Yeah, I think
that's a good one.
I think the point you're making out really resonates with me, because yesterday I was listening to a video from Shane, of the CEO, the joint founder of Thrive Theme. And Shane's been on the show, and I'm trying to get him to come back on the show. And he's one of these entrepreneurs that I always listen to his videos. And he was talking about his 10 years as being an entrepreneur and building Thrive Themes from nothing to over 100 people. And he was saying that he built it with partners. He said he always felt happier with partners. And then he said, he always chose partners that were successful. And the main thing he looked for from a partner was work ethic. Somebody that was prepared to put the work in, like him. And he said, if that person didn't have the same kind of work ethic, it was never going to work out. And I think in some ways you're saying that, aren't you, Davis?
Absolutely. Work ethic is one of the things that we look for. It's like we're literally Saturday night at a type 2 parlor, and I'm calling you, and you're answering these questions we're on LinkedIn Messenger. So it's just all that. It's like I do look for work ethic, because if you think about the people, so for example, the people interview, if they're not willing to go through the 10 minimum hours of pre-interview stuff before they even get to the interview process, I know they're not going to be able to put in the work that makes our clients so successful. And it's the same thing with our projects. And I'm kind of spoiling this out for anyone who's applying for the future roles here, but everyone gets a project to do, and the project isn't easy. It's not something you sit down for 30 minutes and do. It's actually something that you actually have to sit down and think. And you can really tell people who are just nice to have, people who like really want this, and they're just rock star work ethic, and they really care about feedback. And so I'm you have to send me the podcast with Shane. I'm a huge fan of Shane, and had a chance to hear him speak at a conference probably about a year ago, and he's just a stellar leader.
He is, isn't he? He's got he's one of the few, well, not going to say the few people, there's a lot of people in WordPress, but I've always admired his insights. Over to you, Adrian.
So let's talk a little about the transition from doing everything pretty much manually and Zoom calls and emails and all that stuff to starting to formalize a program and putting it into membership and whatnot. Let's talk about where that process started and how you actually went about doing that.
Absolutely. So I'll tell you a couple of things, which is that I'm one of those things where it's the way to describe it is it's when I had that medical bill that I needed to pay off, it was kind of like me being stranded on an island. I'm just going to build a boat out of whatever I can get. And a lot of it's just going to be me taking a bucket and throwing the water out. But later on, you realize, all right, there are certain parts that you need to build out. And so in the beginning, for example, people were emailing me and I needed a way to respond to them. So my first website technically was actually a Google form. So it just redirected straight to a Google form where you fill out, and it just sends me an email to respond back to you if you were qualified to be in our program and so forth. So there's still no membership site. So then at least now I have a lead qualification process with a type form or Google form. Eventually a year later, it'd be a type form, a little nicer. And then we started building things out from there where, for example, one day I was making introductions between our community group. We were putting it on an email list, and I realized, okay, we need to move this up. Okay, we need some sort of site. Okay, you know what? Facebook group, throw them in a Facebook group, which would later on be part of our membership site. But at the time, I was just like, every time there was a pressing need where I realized I'm doing things manually that could be better off automatic, that is when things started clicking for me. For example, when people were having problems trying to find the videos on Google Drive, I was like, all right, well, sorry, Shane, if you're listening to this one, is try Thrive Themes, but then Elementor, I kind of beat them out for what we were looking for. And so we took WordPress, combined it with Elementor, and we were able to build out our community and eventually build out a process so that when someone onboards, we could just give them like a login and they could just go in and so forth, versus before we would have to, all right, so you'll want to go to this Google Drive here, give you access here, share, this is where you find everything, right? So it's like slowly over time replacing the ship that was made out of coconuts with actual real wood and things like that. And we're continuing to do that today. So that's where I started, starting with the membership, building in everything we need. So even today, we still build things at peace versus building this perfect. Like, for example, our testimonial page right now is crashing because it's just, even on Kinsta, it's just so fast. Like finally we have to
I was going through it. There you have a significant number of videos that load on that page.
Yeah, we in the beginning, like no one taught me that there's something called lazy loading or anything like that, or static. So I'm just like, hey, just put all the videos there. It's like whatever. And then one day I'm like, is our site always this slow? We're on Kinsta. I'm paying them good money here. What's going on? So I hit up Kinsta and like, you need like infinite scroll. You need lazy. So they were on it. And then so we built it out. And even now it's still slow. So we're actually transitioning to a next level with a bunch of other WordPress plugins and other things that we're building in. But yeah, we have close to 100 videos now of testimonials, and they basically, I don't automate something until it starts crashing and it's like burning my time. So like, for example, our first customer service team didn't build out until I was answering like 2 hours of customer service emails. And now we have an entire team that does that. So that is the pain point of Davis, is that I don't hire until it just hurts me to continue on.
You know, there's something to be said for that though, because and we talk about this point at least on every single episode that we do, and it's that so many people fail to launch or fail to grow and fail to do all of these things because their mindset is that it needs to be perfect before they show it to somebody, before they start collecting money. And it's backwards, because you should really be focusing on, all right, well, in order to have this business actually be successful, I need to collect money, and I should be able to do that with the most bare bones, basic, minimal viable process, even if it's just doing everything by email and manually. If you can't do it manually, then putting all of these different pieces together is really just a monumental waste of time. So I think the lesson here, and we reiterate this every single time, is that you do not need to have it perfect before you start making money. You can do the most basic minimum viable process, Google form, Google Drive, unlisted YouTube videos, whatever, and you'll still be able to grow and make a viable business, regardless if you don't have like the Lifter LMS or the WordPress or Kinsta or Elementor, all that stuff. Because a lot of times that stuff really just gets in the way of innovation and making great products and allowing you to help people. A lot of the time I see people who think that the products that they use are their solution, which is kind of counterintuitive. They think that their idea is overshadowed by the great things that software and automation can do, and it prevents them from ever actually sharing their core genius and their core value. So
yeah, I think that's great. I'm going to wrap up the podcast to show you. Are you okay staying on, Davis, with a bit of bonus content? We've got some more
Absolutely.
questions.
Happy to answer any questions.
It's been a great interview. So, Davis, how can people find out more about what you are up to and what your company's up to?
Absolutely. I'm super easy to find, as in if I'm on LinkedIn, but if you want to email me, it's just davis@myconsultingoffer.org. And myconsultingoffer.org is just the site, my personal blog, daviswin.com as well. I'll send those on the show notes and everything else as well. But yeah, I'm super easy to find. In fact, I think I make myself too available. Maybe one day I'll figure out an automated process for that too. But for now, hasn't killed me yet.
Chatbot.
Well,
yes, I've thought about that. I've thought about chatbot, especially actually next month. I guess technically, if I remember correctly, like this month they're starting to charge for that, so I probably should get in.
All right, Adrian, how can people find out more about what you are up to and what your company's up to?
So if you're like Davis here and you're currently struggling from too many manual processes, and you are at your wit's end of how to make your life easier, and you're not necessarily ready to invest in employees or some more serious marketing automation tools, you can go to groundhogwith2gs.io. We have a WordPress plugin, a suite of marketing automation and sales tools designed to save you time, save you money, and put out the fires in your sales process. So again, you can go to groundhogwith2gs.io to find out more about that.
And if you want to support the show, go to the WP-Tonic website and sign up for our monthly newsletter. We revamped it. It's got a mixture of entrepreneurship around e-learning with WordPress, plus all the best plugins that we recommend during the month. It's going to be a great resource. Plus, you can win a prize up to $100. Anybody in the month that joins the newsletter, I'm going to choose one of them, and they can win a prize. It might be slightly over $100. Probably going to announce that not this Friday, but the following Friday. So it gives me time to approach the winner. And then if they don't want it, to approach somebody else. We'll see you next week, folks, with another great guest. See you soon, folks. Bye. So you're starting building out the business, you're starting to build processes. But then I find with people that starting to get success in the e-learning area is that they learn rapidly that there's a bit more to trying to educate people online. I get an end result which your users are investing their money and time, and that's why they join your course. They just find that it takes a little bit more insight and that. Did you get to that stage where you were getting feedback where, because you were not so involved in the one-to-one training of people, you were relying on other trainers and you were trying to productize the service, that there was a point where you were losing the quality, or has that never happened?
I mean, as in I remember one of the stark contrasts is that this is actually how we went from Davidson, a tattoo parlor, finding people to crap, we need a 20-hour interview and training process. Is that there was a point in time, that's probably about a year and a half ago, where I made one bad hire, and basically their clients were not happy with the service, and it just hurt me inside to see that. And so that's where I had to translate it over for the quality control. So is it 100% as if I was going to do it? It's hard to say, but some of the coaches I would say on our team, at least I would say all the coaches, are as invested, if not more invested than I am into their clients and so forth, because it's part of our culture and it's part of the process. Like I mentioned, like before you even interview, have to go through like this 10-hour training process that you're not paid for to actually go through. And the only people who actually survive it get interviewed tremendously by our team. So the chance of someone actually making it through to the other end, we try to do our quality control. And in addition to that, we have a head coach, who you will, it's like head of product, who will go in and audit as well. And then we collect feedback from the clients. I get on the phone with the clients still. We have a team that gets on the phone with clients. And so we get that constant feedback. And then of course, the ultimate feedback is, do they get that job? And so we kind of have a internal sheet.
I think I misunderstand. I've got the misconception. Before I throw it over to Adrian, can you quickly, I should have asked you this question in the podcast. So what is the educational kind of process that the average student goes through with you?
So what Dodo Star is that there's basically 3 levels that they have. So one is the membership and the course, of course, with the videos and materials, which some people start with. But what they really learn is that from the membership and from the online course, they really find out what their pain points are. So this is where the team will come in, have a call with you, and think about, okay, so you're really strong at getting interviews, but you just can't pass it. Let's get you paired up with a coach. Or let's make sure you can get your resume edited, but you're a really strong interviewer. Or maybe you just don't need any of it at all. And the membership and the course and just the community itself is more than you need to succeed. And so we still have that personal element. So I'm not completely divorced of it. So I can't say like I'm as many of like the guests that you've had on, like Brian Gartner, obviously Studio Press and everything else. One of my favorite episodes, by the way. I'm like, wow, he builds these things and they scale like nothing. And I'm like, wow, I wish I had that, right? But it's a different approach on it. So that's how I kept the quality going, is making sure that there's still.
No, I think you pointed out, in fact, I should have asked you that earlier, because what you're pointing out is that these students enter, they're individuals and they have strengths and weaknesses. It's just helping them level up on the weaknesses. That's what I think you're saying, isn't it?
Exactly. And funny enough, the way that you said level up, so our technical legal name is actually Rare Candy. For any Pokemon players out there, it's basically Rare Candy is how you level up your Pokemon. And so that's actually our LLC. Okay, talk about things that we also didn't have. I also did not have a name for our company for about like 11 months until I actually filed my taxes. And then that is when we came up with a name. And of course, the placeholder name was Rare Candy. So that's still what shows up on people's receipts when they fulfill the invoice. But yes, essentially it's leveling up their skill set.
Over to you, Adrian.
So little bit of a pivot. And I come from a background of being in an agency and working with clients with very, very long lists of things that they want in terms of value from investing in the process. And I'm sure that's pretty similar with you. When someone invests the amount that they do to be part of your program, there's a certain level of expectation of value. Now, I'm curious if, how you deal with clients who become disappointed or they don't feel like they've received the value that they've invested with. So do you have a process for maybe firing clients or for turning problematic clients into champions? I'd love to hear about how that works.
Yeah, so let's talk about those. So I almost feel like there's 3 different types of people there. So there are people who are, and every company has these, but they're like the people who come in, they will lowball you and they will just want everything. They're kind of like the penny pinchers, if you will. And that's one of the reasons why I'm like, oh, we got to keep raising our prices to filter out. But the people who are there, we try to filter them out during our screening process. So we actually make it hard for them to actually get into the program. So when people get into our membership and so forth, there's an application they have to fill out. And then I'm a huge fan of filtering people who aren't the right fit. And we're able to catch a lot of those. But in the beginning, when I was first starting, man,
It's like, take what you can get.
Exactly. I took whatever I can get. And I will tell you, it is very true when people say that 80% of your stress comes from like 20% of the people. And
that is true. In my case, it's probably like 5%.
Probably, right? And that's exactly what happened. I'm like,
are you talking about me, Adrian?
I am not talking about you.
But no, it's like it's just as part of it. It's like try to filter them out, and then later on is if they do manage to spread the program, we do have a process to fire people. We just say, hey, it's not a good fit. You only paid for this much. You only use this service. I'm just going to refund you the rest of it. And because I realized one thing is that if you fight for every single client that you have, and we love all our clients, like I would say 98% of our clients never cause an issue, but the 2% that it's not a good fit or so forth, then it's just realize that if they're going to cause havoc on our community, if they're going to cause havoc into the coaching and so forth and our team, it's just not worth it. So it's kind of like, yes, I could squeeze out the extra, let's say, benefit of having them in the community monetarily, but then I basically burn my relationship with a team member who could service more. So that's the equation I'm in my mind, is that sometimes I have to have that tough call and say, hey, it's not a good fit.
That's true.
How do you turn? Is there a situation where you have someone who feel like they didn't get the value that they paid for, and then you reverse that, and do you have a process for turning that person from a detractor into a champion?
Absolutely. As in, I will tell you, those are their favorite challenges, because usually it's not an issue with their personality or anything like that. It's just that they haven't either utilized the program fully, or we just misunderstood what their needs were. So I would just get on the phone call, and nowadays my team does, and we just diagnose what the problem is. And then from there, we proceed with them. And if it's like for example, I'll take an example of one client who's actually one of our biggest champions right now. She's like goes out, advocates, introduces us to her school, other people, her friends. But she was like,
it started out rocky.
Started off so rocky, and then people are like, Davis, I cannot work with this person. And then she emailed me. She's like, I cannot work with this coach. And we got on the phone and realized it was just a mismatch. Even though this coach, everyone else loved working with this coach, it was just like a mismatch. So I, based on her personality, paired her up with someone else who was close to her personality, and they just hit it off really well. And then we've had instances with this where we have to switch coaches. I will tell you, for example, one person was a huge detractor, wanted to refund after one session, and the coach who was working with him, she was like, ready to quit. And then we found another coach who was like, and his testimonial in the video is like, yeah, he's like one of my coach is like one of my best friends in real life now. And they're flying out, they're hanging out together. And I'm like, dang. And so it's like one of those things where turning those challenges really is, if it's not a personality, which is that they're all there, the work ethic and everything is there. It's just, I put the onus on me to figure out what the issue is. And a lot of times it is the not either understanding their needs or not finding the right person to help them and service them out. So that's like usually will fix that problem. And it creates like the most successful stories we've ever seen, because it's kind of like they've seen what the rocky side, and they're like, oh wow, this is what everyone else is talking about on your page of hundreds of reviews.
I just got a kind of wrap up question, because I have kind of got a strong work ethic myself. I tend to ask probably too much for myself, because I've got a fair number of things going, and sometimes so I'm very energetic, and then I get burnout, and then I just can't bother with anything for like a day and a half, and I just go off for a hike or something, and I just have to get away from everything. You need that work ethic. You got any insight about when you're pushing it too far for yourself or through your team, and you're going to get burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. Burnout is something I want to measure. So every single meeting I have with my team, I ask them almost like, what's the fun factor? Or another question, how satisfied are you? Things like that. Like one of our coaches, we call it the fun factor, because he loves it. He's just like, Davis, if my fun factor drops below this, it just feels like work. And I don't want this to feel like work. And so we talk, like sometimes he just has to grind through things, but other times, like on majority, we try to keep it really high. But burnout is really, it's quite real. As in, especially when I was doing this as a side project, I will tell you, like, if you look at pictures from my era, I was like overweight. I was like not taking care of myself because there's no time in the day. And I was feeling like this burnout. And so two things I found was really helpful to do to burnout is one, recognize that there was burnout and give myself the okay. I think a lot of times our entrepreneurs, we don't give ourselves that permission to take our foot off the gas, especially unless we feel like we're not like the Brian Gartners, we're not like the Shane, or we haven't earned it. But a lot of times, in order to earn it, you need to be able to pace yourself because it's like a marathon, not just like this sprint.
So it really is a marathon, isn't it?
It is. And just being able to take care of your body and taking care of your health, taking your permission to take away. Like, I remember how I used to feel so guilty. I would work every single day. Even when I transitioned to full time, I would work 7 days a week. And I would do this for months. I didn't take vacation or anything. I just felt I just need to continue to move. But then it was just, I started waking up. I'm like sweating. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like so much to do. But once I started taking time off and to take care of myself, that was when the results increased. So that's the first thing I do, is just to making sure that I give myself that permission to take a break. Same with the team and so forth. And then the second is the reviews page is huge for me. I love our reviews page, even though it's slowly now, but we'll fix that. Is that when I burn out, I feel like if I'm recharged, I need to remember our mission and the lives that we're changing. So I'll just go on and just watch a couple of videos, if not all of them. And then that just really recharges me when people say, Davis, thanks so much for your program, really changed my life. Like, hearing that just really re-energizes me, and just remembering why I'm doing it. And maybe that's why I would be terrible at doing like something like e-commerce. It's because it's like, I don't know what you're doing, but like something like this, more of like a membership where I can actually see the results, that I'm a huge fan of. So hopefully that answers your question. It's like, I give myself permission to not burn out by recognizing it. And second, I just remind myself, why did I do this? Because a good friend of mine reminded me of this, is that he and his partner built out this huge business, and they said, we built all this. You can always take a step back. Like, I can always downscale. I can always go back to just me coaching. I can always go back to just a one-man operation with type form and all of that. But it's like everything that we do is like a man-made construct of it. So our businesses, we built them. I like to think that most entrepreneurs built their business because they want to have some sort of freedom financially, or they want to feel fulfilled. But at the same time, I think some people feel trapped by their creations. And the truth is that you created your creation, so you can uncreate it. So that's the two things I do to keep kind of. So I'm not immune to burnout at all, but I just recognize it when it's coming, and I give myself permission to just take a step back. Yeah.
I think it's been a great interview. I judge a great interview if I've got a load more questions to ask the interviewee, and I have. But I've got to be respectful of your time. And you have to come back later on in the year, maybe, and join a round table or have another interview, because I think we've covered a lot of great stuff. And thank you so much for joining us, Davis.
Adrian, my pleasure. As in, after seeing so many amazing episodes, it's just finally great to be on the other end and to have these fireball questions thrown at me. I'm like, oh, I love it.
All right, thanks, Davis. Like I say, we'll be back next week, hopefully with a guest of similar quality to Davis. We'll see you soon, listeners and viewers. Bye.
Bye, everybody.